Have you ever been in the middle of a task? Maybe you're cleaning the kitchen and you suddenly realize that you are furious at every person in the house who lives there who's ever dared to make the place dirty? Anybody ever felt that way? You're not just washing the dishes, but you're banging the pots and pans around so that everybody else in the house knows that you're the only one actually doing any work. You're doing the right thing by cleaning up the place, but you're about 3 seconds away from a meltdown. I am married to an angry cleaner. And the worst part of being married to an angry cleaner, maybe you can relate if you are also married to one, is that I never know when it's coming. Like, we'll be in the middle of watching TV or something, and she goes to go find a snack or do whatever, and then suddenly, without warning of an incoming strike, she's rage cleaning the refrigerator. And then she's mad because I'm not helping. And I'm like, how did we get here? We were watching a movie. And if you're not the angry cleaner in your house, it's because you're the husband. So there's a point to this, I promise, and it's not just to air my grievances. We have been in a sermon series called The Heart Matters over the last several weeks, and today we are looking at one of the greatest enemies of a healthy heart that is focused on God, and that is distractions. And we live in a world full of distractions, don't we? Maybe you're like me and you can walk into a room with a clear purpose and then 5 seconds later think, why am I here? It happens to me at least 10 times a day on a good day. And distraction doesn't usually feel dramatic, right? It doesn't sound an alarm. It certainly doesn't announce itself. And the thing is, distraction doesn't usually look like doing bad things either. Distraction typically looks like being so busy doing good things that we forget the one thing that we should be focused on. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. Over time, distraction just slowly moves important things out of the center. And so, as a result, we've just kind of turned our lives into really these spiritual warehouses where we've stored up so many to-dos and should-haves that we've buried the very person we're supposed to be following. And I don't think, prove me wrong if you'd like, but I don't think any of us wake up thinking, you know what, I'm going to deprioritize God today, right? That doesn't make any sense. That's not how it works. We just get busy, and then we get tired, and then we get stretched, and then we start responding to what feels urgent instead of what's actually important. And slowly, without us intending to, we move God from the center of our lives out to the margins, right? He's still present. We still believe in him. We still acknowledge him. He's just not first. And that's what today's message confronts. This morning we're going to be reading a passage that many of you may be familiar with. It's the story of Mary and Martha in the book of Luke, chapter 10. Go ahead and flip there if you have your Bibles. But before we get too far into this, let me just say this off the bat. I get really annoyed when this passage is used as a way to tell women to just calm down, and that is not what we are doing today, all right? So don't come at me with your pitchforks. And I can't tell you how many times that I have heard this message or this passage used on Mother's Day, and the pastor just says, ladies, you just need to rest at the feet of Jesus. And you're like, well, that's great, but everybody else is resting at the feet of Jesus, and the house still needs to be cleaned, right? And it's really funny when you hear, on Mother's Day, and the pastor says, ladies, you are just so loved, you just need to rest. And then on Father's Day, the pastor turns around and goes, be a man! So we're not doing that either. The point, what is the point? The point today is to help us, listen, I am working a retreat this weekend, and I got home at 11:30 last night, and then we lost an hour, and then I have an hour commute to get here, and so I don't know if I'm coming or going, so I hope that I'm making sense right now. The point today is to help us recognize where we stand in our relationship with God, and if there are things, even good things, that have caused us to get distracted from the main thing. The reason that we get so mad when we're angry cleaning, or for those of us who are married to someone who does so, it's not just because the fridge is dirty. It's because the person cleaning it feels unseen. They're thinking, I'm doing all of this for them, and they don't even care. If that's you, perhaps you can relate. And not as a knock to you, but just to point out, this is where Martha in this story let distraction win, because she started doing something for Jesus, but because she wasn't with Jesus, her service turned into resentment. That is the reality of the world that we live in. We are a culture of resentful producers because we have forgotten how to be joyful pursuers. So with that said, look with me. I'm thankful for my amen corner this morning. Look with me at Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 38. It says, while they were traveling, he, being Jesus, entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. So let's set the scene here. Jesus is traveling through the village of Bethany, and his group of disciples is here with him. And they all go to Martha's house. And to understand the tension here, you've got to understand the culture of what was going on. So in the ancient world, hospitality is not just a suggestion, it is a sacred duty. And when a teacher like Jesus comes to town, you don't just put out some snacks, you prepare a feast. And with this many people coming, you can't just make a Walmart run. You've got to go all the way to Costco, even if it's out on the east side. Lord help us all. So Martha isn't being extra or over the top here. She is being faithful. She is fulfilling the highest cultural expectation of this day. And then we meet her sister, Mary. Take a look at verse 39. She had a sister named Mary who also sat at the Lord's feet and was listening to what he said. So Mary's posture here toward Christ is also important to note. See, in this culture, to sit at somebody's feet was the image or the picture of a learner in submission to a teacher. Mary loves Jesus, and she doesn't want to miss a single word that he has to say. She is dialed in, and that's great, but imagine the pressure that Martha has to be feeling here, right? She now has a house full of hungry disciples. They're in the living room. The house is hot. Jesus is teaching. The bread probably ain't rising. And she is trying to fill water jars. They're still empty. She is working her tail off for the Son of God, and she is literally trying to prepare a meal for the bread of life. It has to be exhausting, right? It's not all rainbows and butterflies at Martha and Mary's house. Look at verse 40. It says, Martha was distracted by her many tasks. I'll pause here in this verse. Luke uses a very specific word here to describe Martha. He says she is distracted. In the original Greek, the word that we get distracted from literally means to be pulled in all kinds of different directions or to be dragged away. Anybody here ever felt that? You relate to that feeling? You're trying to pray, but your brain is dragging you toward your inbox or toward work. What I'm guilty of, you're trying to have a conversation with your spouse, but the notifications on your phone keep dragging you away. That's what this word means. Martha wasn't distracted by bad things. She was doing what was supposed to be done, but she was distracted by many things. She has 25,000 things going on at once, and she's running around like a crazy person. She wasn't distracted by sin, she was distracted by soup. And it's just as bad. Here's the danger for us. The many things are the greatest enemy of the one thing that we should be focused on. This is where the heart starts to drift. Martha's problem is not that she's in the kitchen. The problem is that Martha's heart has left the room. She is physically 3 feet away from the Messiah, but she's miles away in her mind. Those of you who have grown up in the church and served in the church may be able to relate. And when we turn our hearts into warehouses full of tasks, even good tasks, even God tasks, we eventually run out of room for God himself. So Martha finally snaps. Somewhere in the middle of her to-do list, it dawns on her that she is the only person getting anything done. Mary's just in there lounging around, hanging out with Jesus, and Martha is exhausted. And we've all been there, right? We finally explode at somebody for not helping. Don't look at your spouse right now. It's not the right time. So look at what Martha says to Jesus in the second half of verse 40. She says, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? So tell her to give me a hand." So in my mind, I can just picture Martha sticking her head around the corner from the kitchen. You know, her hair's a mess. She's probably got flour all over her face, and she's fired up, right? In the great Commonwealth of Kentucky, we call that fit to be tied. If you don't know what that means, see me after service, and I'll translate redneck. But surely we can relate to that feeling, right? It's so easy for us to get distracted from the main thing because of all the little things that feel like they have to be done. And we all live in a Martha world where it's so easy to get distracted. We have 50 tabs open in our brain at once, and like at least 3 of them are playing music, and we don't know where it's coming from. And it can even happen right here at church. We think that we have to do all the things, and don't get me wrong, those are important. Please still show up to serve if you're scheduled next week. But we can think that being busy for God is the same thing as being with God, and it's not the same. And eventually we start letting those things impact our own walk with Christ. When our service to God affects our relationship with God, we've lost sight of the whole reason that we're serving to begin with. And then Martha does what many of us have been guilty of doing. She goes from welcoming Jesus to blaming Jesus. Notice what she's implying here in this verse. Jesus, if you really cared about me, you wouldn't be talking to my sister right now. You'd be telling her to get up and do some work. How many times have we been guilty of doing the same thing? How many times have you tried to kick him out of the driver's seat because you think you know better how to drive the vehicle? I don't know about you, but every single time I've done this in my life, 100% of the time, it never works out. It's almost like he knows. Even with the best of intentions, we still mess up, right? But the conversation still doesn't end there. While she's running around with her hair on fire, she now starts making demands of Jesus. She says, "Tell her to give me a hand." And what I think is really funny here is that Martha doesn't say this to Mary. She says it to Jesus, even though Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet, right? Martha is so mad at Mary that now she's being passive-aggressive and not even talking to her own sister. That's how you know this is getting ridiculous, right? But as Jesus always does, even in the middle of our chaos and our mess, even in the middle of our frustration and our immaturity, right in the middle of the chaos that we have created by all of our distractions, Christ does not answer with anger or malice. He's not annoyed. He doesn't roll his eyes and tell her to shut up and get back to work. Look at the response of Christ in verse 41. The Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things." Jesus responds here in this moment with a kindness that is disarming. And he says her name twice, Martha, Martha. He's not being condescending here. See, in Hebrew tradition, saying a name twice was a sign of intimacy, of care, and of love. It's what God did with Abraham and Moses and Samuel in the Old Testament. It's the voice of a father saying, "I see you, and I see your hustle, and I see your stress, but you've missed the point." And notice here, Jesus doesn't scold Martha for cooking. This is what she is supposed to be doing as the host in her home. But he challenges her for being distracted. He says, "You are worried and upset about many things." And we're not too different. In Martha's culture, you're judged by how well you treat your guests. In today's society, we're judged by how busy we are. And we wear it like a badge of honor, don't we? We are constantly running around and wearing ourselves out and being distracted by so many things that we just work ourselves into an anxious mess. Think about if we were in Martha's shoes. If Jesus stepped into our lives and literally into our homes, would he walk into what is a heart of worship or a heart that's become a warehouse storing up all of our anxieties? because of all the things that we think we have to do. But the thing I think I love most about this exchange is not only does Jesus show compassion, but through this statement, he also affirms what she's going through here. For all the doers in the room, hear me, this statement can sound like it's a slap on the wrist because Martha's doing too much, but Christ's intent and his heart behind this statement isn't condemnation. It is him recognizing and acknowledging and validating what Martha is feeling. Jesus is not telling her to get over it. He shows her that he recognizes the frustration that she's experiencing. But his validation does not endorse her distraction either. It doesn't give her a free pass to continue behaving this way, but it does redirect her focus with compassion. He's telling Martha, and he's telling all of us too, I want all of you, not just your work, not just what you can do for others, for yourself, or even just for me. He says, I want all of you. He's not a cold and distant God who doesn't care what you're going through. He looks at you today, he looks at all of us and says, hey, I know this is really hard. I know these things that you were going through are difficult. I know it feels like it's all crashing down around you and you're the only one holding it together. But he also says, I want you to know that you don't have to bear the weight of that responsibility. The psalmist said in chapter 46, God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. And he's about to help in Martha's situation too. Look at how this exchange ends in verse 32. He says, but one thing is necessary. Mary has made the right choice, and it will not be taken away from her. Jesus says only one thing is necessary. Think about that. In a world of many things, Jesus offers the one thing. And he's not asking Martha to be less productive here. He's just asking her to be more present. He's showing us that the God part of our lives isn't just something that gets stuck over here in the corner, that God is meant to be the center of our lives. God is not a checklist to complete, but a person to sit with. And Mary isn't being lazy either. She's being attentive. She realizes that the king is in the room. But just because Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet, it doesn't mean that Martha is doing the wrong thing. Martha was learning. Mary was serving. Even if it looked like they were doing different things. They're both acts of worship. Their roles look different, but their heart posture should be the same, growing in a relationship with Christ. And so Martha's problem wasn't the kitchen, it was just her perspective. And it's easy for us, knowing this story and reading this story, to sit and judge Martha for clanking pots and pans around and having a bad attitude. If she had a refrigerator, she would have been angry cleaning it too, bless her heart. But if we move away from the kitchen in Bethany to our own homes, we have to ask the question, what are the many things that have become the main thing for me? Because here's the hard truth, friends. You can't be devoted to Jesus if you're constantly distracted by the things that you think are more important. In other words, where is the clutter in your own warehouse? We often think that the biggest threat to our faith is sin, those big and obvious bad things, and sometimes they are, but for most of us in this room, the biggest threat is actually distraction. We aren't necessarily being pulled away by evil. We're just being pulled away by all of the good things that have taken up too much space. We wear our packed schedules like it's something to be proud of. We've got too much stuff in that warehouse of our lives, career goals and kids' sports and social standings. I mean, good Lord, you try to go check the weather on your phone and suddenly you're pulled into social media and you're looking at somebody's vacation pictures from 2019. We think if we're not stressed, it's also because it's cold outside and I'm jealous, but that's not the point. We think that if we aren't stressed, we aren't succeeding. But if our success requires us to be too distracted to sit at the feet of Christ or serve Him in a way that brings us joy and brings us life, is that really success? We're so busy building our own kingdom that we've stopped sitting at the feet of the King. And as a result, we've just kind of pushed Jesus back to the back corner of the basement. He's not even in the living room anymore. And like, we haven't kicked him out of the house. We've just piled so much laundry on him that you can't see him anymore. But imagine what our lives would look like if we followed Jesus' call to Martha here. Some translations of verse 42 say Mary has chosen the better part. And man, that is such a hopeful phrase. It means that sitting at His feet, whether literally or figuratively, it's not a luxury for the super spiritual, it is a choice for the hungry. And even when we think of ourselves as more of a Martha than a Mary, we can still choose the better part in all of our doing. Choosing the better part means deciding that something else is going to go unfinished to make room for Christ. And please hear my heart here. Out of Martha and Mary, I am the Martha. I am doing all the things, and I can't sit down, and I usually can't shut up either. I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad or condemned here. I'm preaching as much to myself as I am anyone else. And so with that thought, imagine for the other Marthas in the room what our lives would feel like if we were willing to leave just one single thing unfinished this week so that we could be more present with God. Maybe the better part is leaving the dishes in the sink for 10 extra minutes so you can go pray. Maybe it's turning off the podcast in the car so you can actually listen. It's choosing the hush over the hustle. And imagine how grounded we'd feel without the distractions pulling us in multiple directions and the peace we would feel sitting at His feet. See, Martha was loved by Jesus. He was not scolding her for serving. He wasn't kicking her out. He was inviting her in. And He's doing the same for us. If we can learn anything from this exchange, it's that God isn't asking for perfection. He's just asking for priority. Maybe the most honest prayer you can pray is this: God, I didn't mean to move you. I just got distracted. And listen, Phyllis, this isn't in my notes. I'm going off script for a second, but I'll come back. She loves when I do this. If you are someone who struggles with distraction, and every so often you get this wild hair and you're like, I'm going to clear out everything in my life and I'm going to be devoted to Christ, and then suddenly this distraction creeps back in, and like 3 or 4 times a year you get back to this point that you realize, how did I get here? Please hear me. You are not alone, and it doesn't mean that you have failed. Every day is a new day, and every day is an opportunity to start fresh in your relationship with Christ. Listen to me. This Apple Watch, about 3 or 4 times a year, I get to a point where I'm like, I can't take this anymore, and I'm going back to a regular old-fashioned watch, and I do it for like a month, and then I realize I'm missing everything, and I put it back on, and every time I do, I'm like, this is the dumbest thing that I could be doing right now, all right? It doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that distractions are taking God's place. And you know what? If you need to wake up tomorrow and sling the Apple Watch down, so be it. Every day is a new day, and every day you can start fresh. If you don't, I will pick it up before I'm done. It was just a good illustration. Everybody went, it's fine. If you don't know Him today, if you've never accepted the free gift of salvation from Him today, His invitation is the same. It's the same invitation that He made to Martha. Jesus responded to Martha's frustrations with deep affection. And you know what? He responds to your questions and your struggles and your doubts with deep affection as well. Centuries later, he responds to us with that same grace. He is not standing over you with a clipboard checking your productivity. He has no interest in your numbers and all the great things that you are doing. He is sitting at the table, and he is pointing to the empty chair next to him, saying, "Come here and rest in my presence." And in his presence, there are no distractions, only peace. Praise be to God.